Well, Chris, if you had asked me after Wrestle Dream on Saturday how AEW would start their episode of Dynamite that followed up, I would probably tell you it would have some big pomp and circumstance to do with Bryan Danielson, who, if you recall, lost his title at Wrestle Dream. Not only that, but his full-time in-ring career is over because of that loss. And I would have probably said much of Dynamite's focus tonight would be on that loss by Bryan Danielson and the aftermath of that. Yet, the big story to me coming out of this show is just how little Bryan Danielson was mentioned directly or indirectly by wrestlers, by the announcers who alluded to a change in culture, a shift in how AEW is operating these days without coming out and really mentioning Bryan Danielson. So, we had Adam Cole lead off the show, top babyface in the company, didn't once mention Bryan Danielson. The first match of the show, FTR versus Big Bill and Brian Keith, nothing to do with Bryan Danielson. So to me, the big story coming out of this show was just, and obviously it was a directive. Obviously this was something that was purposeful in the booking, but it was just shocking to me that Bryan Danielson was persona non grata on this show. What did you make of that?
That's interesting because I fully expected the show to open with the Moxley threatening video clip, which of course we got, and I was really hoping for a little bit more explanation, and I think we did get that too, with the. I wrote down the note of how ominous the line of "you work for me now" was, and just that whole vibe of those promos. It's going to get a little old with the way they shoot those, sort of the grainy 8mm effect. But the lack of mention of Bryan Danielson, it didn't actually stick out to me. And now that you've pointed it out, yeah, it was clearly done intentionally. And I'm wondering if it's just he's asked them to move on, or if they are hoping to push him back in our minds so that when he does make his big comeback, it's a big surprise. I'm really glad we didn't have to see the plastic bag spot again, because if I never see another one of those again, it'll be too soon. But then again, I
Absolutely.
said that after All In or All Out or whichever one it was. But no, it's interesting because, yeah, the transition to Adam Cole as the top face was pretty clear. Darby Allin not being there added to that. The pushing back down the card of Orange Cassidy was very clear as well, despite it looking like they were going to make him a little bit more serious. He was very prominent in the closing shot on Saturday. So it's almost like they've just completely rewritten everything.
It's hard for me to understand the thought process. And I get that this was a show about establishing the new world order of AEW, so to speak. And I don't mean with the capital letters. I don't mean the organization. I mean just generally speaking. Jon Moxley, you mentioned, led off the show with that the kind of promo footage that we've become accustomed to on AEW TV. We had one attack that ended the 6-man tag between Matt and Nick Jackson and Okada versus Rocky Romero, Orange Cassidy, Kyle O'Reilly. That ended in a no contest because the group that was formerly known as the BCC interfered. And then later on in the show, they had an attack backstage, attacked the Dark Order, who had come out to help the conglomeration, as well as Top Flight. So they were, that sense of chaos was put throughout the show. So that was clearly the focus. But Excalibur was in tears on Saturday night when Bryan Danielson lost. And to just kind of not address that at all in any meaningful way, that your champion, that one of your top stars, if not your top star, is now done as a full-time wrestler. It was a strange decision. And again, it was a conscious decision. It wasn't like they went the first hour and then, at the top of the second hour, they started talking about it. Like, it wasn't even that. It was that they didn't talk about it at all. So it just, very, very strange to me.
It's a good point. And I think when you think about it, it would have been out of place to do any sort of celebration of Bryan Danielson at the start of the show because of how Wrestle Dream ended. A fanfare or a retrospective on his career would have been weird, considering that we're supposed to be worried about his health. But then make us worry about his health. We should be knowing he's okay, he's recovering, he's at home. Did I like the show? Yes. Did I think there was a lot of potential here? Sure. But the lack of mention of Bryan Danielson, even just to make us worry about him, did kind of stick out. I don't think they could overdo it because they do want to move on. He isn't going to be there full time, and they do need to establish a new pecking order. But yeah, I can see both sides of it.
Yeah, like you said, give me an update on his condition, even if that's to me the bare minimum. Update on his condition, show me some backstage footage. What was it like when he got back through the curtain? What was it like when he came to the realization that he's no longer a full-time wrestler, the thing that he loved more than anything else, professional wrestling? And again, maybe they save that for another time, but I think, if you're a Bryan Danielson fan, if you're a fan of AEW's baby faces, I think you left this show pretty unsatisfied with the way they didn't address that.
I mean, we got an update on Kill Switch before we got one on Bryan Danielson. And I don't want to hear from him yet. I don't think him speaking backstage, he shouldn't have been able to talk for a while after that attack. I don't have a problem with that. But they needed a little bit more than we got, I think, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's take a step back and pause as Wade Keller usually does at this point in the show and kind of introduce ourselves. I am Pro Wrestling Torch columnist Greg Parks, and this indeed is the Wade Keller Pro Wrestling Post Show for AEW Dynamite on October 16th, 2024. The other voice you hear, and depending on how you're consuming this, the face that you see is Chris Lansdell, the PWTorch.com contributor who is a man of many hats at PWTorch.com. He's got a podcast with Kelly Wells focusing on New Japan. He often joins Wade on these AEW post shows. So, Chris, I know that we had, before I left Wrestling Night in America, we had a date lined up for you to be on the show, and then something came up for me and I couldn't do it. So I am glad this is the first time that we're getting to podcast together. So I'm glad it did work out in the end, and we were able to get together to talk wrestling.
Yeah, it's good. We did do a couple Wrestling Night in Americas. We did one right after Wrestle Kingdom, for example.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, we did. And I did call in from Money in the Bank because I was on site with my son. But you do so many of these, Greg. But no,
I apologize. I apologize.
It's all good. It's our first post show. And it's good to be on these. I love doing these. Wade is clearly afraid of another 4-hour special like we did after All In. So I don't blame him for not being here. But no, I'm looking forward to chatting about the show and chewing it up with you.
Awesome. Absolutely. I was on the Wrestle Dream post show, the Roundtable podcast with Todd Martin and Wade Keller on Saturday night. So it was very strange, and I mentioned it on the show. If you listen to it, if you haven't, go back and listen to it because there's a lot of fun recording that with Todd and Wade. I don't usually get to do those roundtables because normally I'm hosting Wrestling Night in America, the post show here on YouTube after that. And I even made mention, like, it's very strange to be knowing that I'm recording a podcast at the same time that there's a post show going on YouTube that I'm always hosting and have been for the last 7 years. So it took a while to get used to that. But we're here and we're talking AEW Dynamite, the follow up to Wrestle Dream. And of course, if you are joining us live in the chat, we'd love to hear from you. Got a couple comments that we want to get to as well. We've got Sean from Murfreesboro, Tennessee, waiting to jump on with us as well to give his thoughts on Dynamite tonight. A couple things I've noted in the chat already. Anthony B saying, what was the point of putting the belt in the bag? We didn't get any explanation. I feel like that's going to be something when everything is answered, because there are still a lot of questions about what Jon Moxley represents. Who is he working for? Who's pulling the strings, if anyone, behind the scenes with this Moxley group? I feel like, we may not get this is why I'm putting the belt in the bag, but it could become clear once that the fuller explanation is given.
I just thought it was that they don't care about it. The belt was a means to an end. It was to put Moxley at the top. He didn't come out with it tonight, I don't think. I don't believe I saw him holding it at any point, because that's not why he's doing any of this. Mm-hmm. And I think we saw some pieces click into place tonight, and he said it's not about me. It's about, well, what it is about apparently is saving AEW. I tried to keep a running tally tonight on the number of times people said it's the best wrestling in the world, or where the best wrestle or the best pro wrestlers are. I gave up at 6, but they started with Jon Moxley saying that right at the opening of the show, and I think that's indicative of where this is going. He's not doing any of this because he wants to be champion. He wants to save AEW, which is a classic wrestling motivation.
Uh-huh. And Zach throwing in, the BCC attack on Orange Cassidy and company felt like being transported back to 1996 in a good way. It was a more violent version of a classic NWO attack. And yeah, I kind of mentioned the New World Order that Moxley has created within AEW, and it wasn't meant to be a reference to the wrestling group, but there are parallels, Chris, to the NWO's attacks in WCW. AEW just has to be careful, because that week after week, month after month, those attacks by the NWO with seemingly no comeuppance, a feeble WCW trying to fend them off, it got old after a while, and it got very stale. So I do think that AEW has something here with this Moxley group. I'm interested to see where they go with it. I'm interested to see what the reveals are, the bigger picture in terms of what Moxley is doing and why he's doing it. But I do think you have to be careful that you don't overdo that too, the way that they did with the NWO.
I think my opinion on this is going to be unpopular, except for possibly Zach in the chat, who might like this. I love what they're doing here. Invasion angles have never been done well in pro wrestling. I'm not putting any disclaimers on that. They've just never worked. The NWO was the only one that came close. And like you said, it got old and it got too big. And it was just, by the end of it, it was garbage. What they are doing here, and I think the way it's working, is because they have 3 factions. You've got the BCC, you've got the people who are sticking up for AEW, and then you've got the elite who don't want anything to do with it. And I thought the angle backstage with Private Party and Daniel Garcia standing up in the faces of the elite and saying, you should do something about this, was excellent. And it added another dimension to the whole thing. Because ultimately, I think it's going to be Kenny Omega coming back, who is going to turn the tide on this. And we will see Bryan Danielson show up, and possibly we have some sort of cage match or war game style thing where we have, the AEW faction against this BCC faction. Will that turn the Bucks back face? I don't know. But I think there's a whole bunch of potential here. Everything kind of made sense tonight. And there was a storyline, well, except maybe the main event, but we'll get to that. There was a storyline threaded throughout the show with all these things that seemingly didn't belong, but they tied it all together. And it's what we've been crying out for them to do for months. And they're finally getting to that point.
Lady B in the chat says, whenever Mox is on screen, I end the segment feeling sad, uncomfortable, or angry. So he's doing his job as the biggest heel in the company. That is for sure. I agree. I mean, I think Moxley is doing a fantastic job. He's bringing the intensity in a way that makes the viewer uncomfortable. And sometimes that line gets crossed, like when we use the plastic bag, which we both agree, I think, is a step too far. But Moxley's promos and just his body language, the way he carries himself, it's just he's doing such a great job, and it's mesmerizing. Like when he's on screen, your eyes are drawn to him because of just the way he moves. Almost, it's what he says, but it's also how he carries himself in this role. So it's been really cool to see Moxley get this opportunity. And there was a time where I thought, Moxley is a heel. Is anyone really going to boo him at this point? He's just he's people love him. People love the curmudgeonly Jon Moxley as much as they love babyface Jon Moxley, but he's really tapped into something that makes people really disgusted with him at this point.
And a shout out to Zach Haydorn. I could do a full hour podcast on the artistry of this Jon Moxley thing. He's the best kind of heel right now. He is the heel who has an understandable motivation. He has righteous indignation. He's got a bit of the Joker in him. He's speaking for fans like me and Wade, for that matter, who's saying, I want to love AEW. I want AEW to exist, but there are people out here dancing and celebrating for no reason. They're caring about the wrong things. And I'm just sitting there going, yes, that's right. But he's also despicable, and he's doing these horrible things to the people that the fans love. Mm-hmm. He's just hitting on every single possible strand of an excellent heel character. Very few people can do what he is doing, and he is nailing it.
Yeah. By the way, you dropped Zach Haydorn's name, friend of the show. Got his book right here, Stunning, the wrestling artistry of Steve Austin. I reviewed this book in my latest column for the Torch newsletter, coming out this week, and the VIP audio show, Greg Parks Out Loud. I did my review of it, so check it out if you haven't already. Spoiler alert, it's great, obviously. So I want to throw that out there and give Zach a plug while we're mentioning him. Speaking of plugs, a couple other things I want to plug here before we get further into things. I mentioned VIP, my VIP audio show, Greg Parks Out Loud, only available to VIP members of PWTorch.com. Go VIP to gain access to Wade Keller's full audio, start to finish rundown of these TV shows, his segment-by-segment analysis on the Wade Keller hotline. You can do that, PWTorch.com/GoVIP. Wade is here every Monday night after Raw, Wednesday night after Dynamite, Friday night after SmackDown, covering Raw, Dynamite, and SmackDown. I was on the SmackDown post show as a guest a couple weeks ago, hosting here tonight, and happy to do so. And of course, if you want to be a part of the show, if you're listening and watching live on YouTube, type your comments into the chat. And if they're especially intriguing or thought-provoking, we will discuss them amongst ourselves. You can subscribe to this post show on your podcast app, the red logo show, and our regular flagship podcast, which is the blue logo in your feed. Search Wade Keller on Spotify or Apple Podcast or any other podcast app. I think that's it. Oh, one more thing. Like the show. It's really easy. Just press the button, comment, subscribe to our channel. We give you a lot of material here on the PW Torch YouTube channel, so hope you'll check it out as we can go through. So just a lot of fun. I always enjoy being on here with Wade, whether it's the flagship or one of these post shows. Always a lot of fun. So let's bring on Sean from Murfreesboro, Tennessee. He's been waiting patiently backstage. Sean, it's good to hear from you again. I mean, I feel like we just said our goodbyes a couple of weeks ago, and here we are back again. And it's like, you can't miss me if I don't go away, right?
Because I won't let you go away, Greg. I just won't let it happen. I refuse to let this happen. No, I was excited when I saw you were going to get to host. I was glad because, I mean, like I said, I was glad to hear you on the post-show roundtable with Wade and Todd. I know you haven't really got to do those, so that was fun getting to hear you guys talk. And Chris, man, it's always a pleasure. Even when I don't agree with you either, I still love when you talk about wrestling. It's always a blast. How are you guys doing tonight?
I mean, why would you not want to agree with me, Sean? I'm clearly objectively right. I don't get it.
I know.
Good to talk to you, man. Good to have you on.
Yeah. So. Okay, I'll bring up the Mox stuff because I have a lot of thoughts. Okay, so I agree with what you're saying about Mox and his Moxie, no pun intended. I love everything about Jon Moxley, like as far as the character, like who he is, the bravado he has, the way he does he makes you feel, like you said, invested in what he's doing. And I'm all agreed with that 100%. The only thing I'm struggling with is they did all like I know Wade's talked about it, and I've been in agreement with him. Like the plastic bag, it to me is stupid, and then they did it again, which is stupid. I didn't get Wrestle Dream. I just kept up with all their reports. I listened to all the podcasts. They weren't going to get my money, honestly. The build to that show was not worth my money. It just wasn't. They did a bad job building the show, and other than Moxley Danielson, which was a fun build as far as you were invested in the match, even though I still don't know if Jon Moxley's ever really said, and the guys have ever said why he really turned on Danielson. I don't know if I missed it, let me know, because I still don't feel like he's really explained that very well. And I just feel like even tonight, his explanation just felt generic to me of, oh, I felt like not a lot of go-getters. Like, we're going to take over. And it's like, okay, I know the ratings have been bad. If you're going to go from that perspective, yeah, you want to make the ratings better. You want to find a way to increase that.
Imagine Moxley bringing out a big chart showing the ratings up and down and pointing that out in his promo, right?
Oh my gosh, no! He would never do that. Thank goodness.
Stop giving Jericho ideas.
I know, jeez, man. But I just feel like in tonight with the whole angle at the end of that match, was okay. When you do these big prolonged beatdowns of all these guys, and then you have Garcia, which you said earlier, yes, he made it make sense, but then why is he not coming out? Why are they not coming out? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. If you hate these guys that much and you have Private Party and all these guys with you, why would you not go out and defend these guys? It just doesn't make any sense. And so there's a lot of the things to me that are not clicking yet. I know it's early on. There's still more explanations to come. But I just don't feel like I've gotten a full explanation from Mox of why they're all doing this. I just don't feel totally invested in that part yet. If they do that continuously and they keep building to this, I'm still invested. I'm still intrigued. And I'm not trying to hate on it, but I'm just being honest of my feelings where I'm at right now with it. So talk me off the ledge. Has he really given a real mission statement of why he turned on Danielson, why he's against AEW, and then just on this heel persona? I like that he's got Marina with him. He couldn't have been heel by himself. Like, he had to have people with him to make him feel like, okay, I really hate this guy. These guys are with him, whatever. But help me with that. Help me with that part of it.
Well, to go back to the point about the baby faces and specifically Daniel Garcia not coming out to help, I think that was a real sore point for me at WrestleDream when it took so long for the baby faces to come out at the end of the show, and even Jim Ross kind of making an off-the-cuff comment about what took them so long. Yes, but it was
Where
true.
Are you, Double J?
And it was what everybody was thinking. So I don't fault JR really for saying that. But I think it did point out a very big plot hole of no one coming out. Maybe you could kind of in your own mind come up with the idea that there were just too many heels, and it was a situation where if you were a top babyface going out there into a 4-on-1 situation, it would not end well for you, and that's just the reality of it. But yeah, I think they could do better to explain or have baby faces come out quicker. But Chris, to me, the whole Moxley, this reimagined BCC group, they're purposely vague. They kind of alluded to, Bryan Danielson. It wasn't personal, right? It wasn't something that Moxley had against Bryan Danielson. It was the system that he was fighting against. So they've been purposely vague here. And I think the questions that Sean raised are questions that you're kind of meant to raise in this storyline. Yeah. Is that kind of how you're interpreting it?
He did say that Bryan wasn't going to go home on his own. He was going to keep fighting until he couldn't move anymore. So Moxley had to be the one to stop him. That was the motivation that we did get. I think they're giving us little tidbits every week. Every week we're getting a little bit more about why Moxley's doing this, why he needs these people around him, and why he has to do it the way he's doing it. They're sort of drip feeding this to us. And I think if we want long-term storytelling, if we want them to stop hot-shotting things, and if we want them to build things up, this is what we have to deal with, because we can't have it all thrown at us in 1 week. That's what we've been complaining about. If you look at the Bloodline storyline, which is without question, even though Zach Barber is going to disagree with me and say it was Mariah May and Tony Storm, the best storyline we've seen in professional wrestling in 35 years, easily.
Yes.
And it's if we want something to come anywhere near that, we have to understand that it's going to take weeks to develop. I don't want all the motivation at once. I don't want him to come out there and lay out his entire plan and then rip the mask off the guy who's been tied up by Scooby-Doo. We're not ready for that part yet. Give it some time. Let it build. We know why he went after Danielson. We know now what he's trying to do. He now runs AEW. He wants to rebuild it in his image. He wants the company to look like what he thinks professional wrestling should be. How that's going to shape up, we'll wait and see. But
right.
You know, I see where it's going.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair to come back with that. And you know, these prolonged beatdowns are going to get hard to do every week. That they are. I mean, I will stand by that firm. I don't think you can do that every week. I don't think it makes faces look good. I don't think I'm worried about more plastic bags. I'm worried. I hope that doesn't happen again. It didn't need to happen. When I saw it happen to Wrestle Dream, I was like, come on, Tony, you got to stop this. I mean, it's not good. It's not. I mean, it's just. I mean, and Moxley should have been, honestly, like I've said. I don't care who agrees with me. He should have been suspended or something. Like when you do those things, you have to have some kind of repercussion. You just have to. I don't care. I will never back down on that. I will never back down on that. That does not make
Sean,
any sense.
That's an interesting point because, and Chris, you can jump in too. You know, Moxley is running roughshod over Tony Khan's company. Yeah. He took out Bryan Danielson, ended his career, which, you know, you could see theoretically costing Tony Khan money. Bryan Danielson is champion. He's a popular figure, going to cost him money. You know, we haven't heard from Tony Khan or Tony Khan's surrogates about what Jon Moxley and his group are doing. And I wonder what it's going to take for Tony Khan to step in and say, okay, I have to put my foot down here. Or even if that's going to happen, like if that's going to be part of the story they're telling. But it certainly does feel like it's building to the point where the Moxley group is causing so much destruction that you would imagine Tony Khan would have to get involved or at least comment or do something to try to put a stop to this, even for a short time. I mean, do you see that happening at all? And I'm not certainly endorsing Tony Khan becoming a weekly figure on TV where, you know, it's Jon Moxley versus Tony Khan every week, right? And they're battling for control of AEW or something like that. But if I'm someone sitting here watching AEW and I'm seeing what Moxley's group is doing week after week, I'm wondering, where is Tony Khan? Where is the boss? Just as Sean said, where are the fines? Where are the suspensions?
I don't believe this week we heard anything being made backstage. I don't think Shivani got anything in his ears saying Tony Khan has made it official. I don't think his name was mentioned at all. But we also don't know why we haven't heard about it. Maybe he's afraid. Maybe he can't take any action because Moxley is the champion. It would be really cool if they said Moxley is technically out of contract, and if we take any action against him, he can take our belt and walk to another company. Yeah, that would be a nice little bit. Of course, in this day and age, everybody knows when his contract is up to the minute and nobody's going to buy it. But I think this story has some definite beats to go through. The beatdowns can't go on like this, I agree. But for now, they're still okay. Then we need to have a definite pecking order of faces to stand up. Daniel Garcia has put himself first in line. He's sort of the upper mid-card guy. Orange Cassidy will be in there. Darby Allin will be in there. They're all going to fail. And then you'll have Kenny Omega come back as the conquering hero. He'll try to get the Elite on side. And he will be the one that takes the title away from Moxley. That's me fantasy booking 6 months down the line. But that's what I'm thinking is the plan here. Like, he has to be the hero. He's the EVP. So he'll come in with the authority that we're looking for here. According to Kota Ibushi, he's 2 or 3 months away. I think this storyline has plenty of legs to go through that long. Maybe they beat up Christopher Daniels in the meantime. That could buy them some time as well. There's a lot that can happen here. And that's actually a good point that Ramen Noodle just made. The EVPs aren't doing anything because they say it's nothing to do with them. They're afraid of him, basically. So if Tony Khan isn't going to do it, Christopher Daniels gets beaten up. They need a conquering hero. In comes Kenny Omega, and there you go. The beatdowns, yes, I agree. They need to stop.
I think it's fine if you want to portray the Elite as being afraid of Jon Moxley. I'm not sure if that's something you want to portray Tony Khan, the owner of the company, as being afraid of Jon Moxley. But again, you know, it's still very early in this this group's existence, I guess. So, as Chris mentioned, there's a lot of beats still to go here. So, Sean, anything else? Any other impressions or thoughts on Dynamite tonight?
Yeah, definitely a few. Like I said, I don't get to talk about Dynamite live on here very often, so I try to take the time when I do because it's very, very, very rare. Going back to the MJF Cole stuff, like you just brought up, I mean, it's fine. It just feels so weird because it's been so long, and we really wanted to get away from them, honestly, going against each other. And now it's just like, yeah, Cole turned on him before he got hurt, and now they're back, and Cole's all of a sudden the good guy, and like, oh, this is what MJF is, which he's being honest, like that's who MJF was. But yeah, you should have known that before you became friends with him all that time. And so, yeah, he's a good guy now. Like he's admitting, like, hey, he's fake. This is who he is. Whatever. It just feels weird the roles they are now. It's like, I don't know. I just wish they would kind of go a different way with them. Honestly, I just really don't want to rehash it again because even though they're not rehashing that, like they might bring some of it up, but they got so bad there for a while. I just don't want them to go back to it again. So, how do you guys feel about his promo tonight, or both their promos, and where do you think they're going from here with them?
I had images of Drew McIntyre's CM Punk running through my head during Adam Cole's promo because he was talking about how much he hated MJF. And that's where we eventually got to in Drew McIntyre versus CM Punk. So I'm wondering if Adam Cole MJF is going to follow a similar trajectory as McIntyre and Punk, where they just get more and more underneath each other's skin as this feud develops. Sean mentioned the kind of paradoxes that we're dealing with the Cole and MJF storyline. And some of it was just, it wasn't anybody's fault. It was injuries here and there, off TV here and there, and things kind of got bungled in terms of who's babyface and who's heel. And then the next time they're on TV, it's reversed and there's no turn and all this kind of stuff. So all of that being said, did they end up in a place, Chris, tonight where you could say, okay, I can put to bed all that other stuff that's happened, all the weirdness of the Cole MJF stuff. I'm on board with this storyline now.
They certainly tried. They really didn't have a choice. And like you said, it's not due to any sort of bad booking. They had to go back to MJF and Cole because of the way that ended, with Cole turning on MJF and then MJF punting Cole in the groinal region. They had no choice but to go back there. Cole needed to be a face coming back. Turning him heel was a bad choice anyway because the guy's just too popular. He's a lot like Okada. You're always going to get the cheers for the boom and the Adam Cole baby, and you'll never get away from that.
No,
so
true.
You've got this awkward situation where MJF should never have been a face. Adam Cole should never have been a heel. Now, but having said that, they're now where they should be. We just have to do a little bit of hand waving. The match will be good. MJF has proven over the past year that when he wants to, he can be one of the best wrestlers on the planet. Adam Cole, for his foibles, is still excellent in the ring.
Please stay healthy. Please, yeah, Cole. Please, Adam.
He's probably one of the better people and one of the more underrated people on the microphone right now in that company. So that is an excellent second from the top feud to carry us through the next couple of months. A couple of notes I had on that segment. Nobody sighs like that after drinking red wine. It is not a refreshing beverage. I'm sorry. And also, did anybody else catch the cameraman telling Adam to stop walking up the ramp and stay still because he needed to send them off with a chair before they went to the commercial? It was pretty audible. Man, this is giving me flashbacks to John Cena calling matches. Like they actually said to him, "Adam, come back for the break," and he came. He turned around.
I thought it was very awkward how long he stood up on the ramp. Like that was, with the camera on him. I'm like, this is getting awkward.
He walked off and they called him back, and then he turned around and did the poses and stayed there for a bit. And I'm just like, oh,
interesting. Okay.
And he's still looking around him, like expecting MJF to come out of one of the entrances.
That's what I was thinking. I'm like, okay, we're gonna get it. He's gonna get blindsided, and it didn't happen. Yeah, weird. 5 years in, and they're still doing this stuff.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so like I said, I'll be fine with it. I mean, it feels weird just because of that, but I know why they went back to it. It's like, you want to kind of do that unfinished business, and that all that happened, and so they're in the spots they should have been in all along. So I'm fine. I like that. So that's good. Going just to Mercedes, like the match with Queen Aminata was what it was. Honestly, it just I'm so down on Mercedes right now. I'm so down. I was so, even for AEW, like, again, I love it. I want them to do well. I was like, man, maybe Mercedes can turn things around here in AEW, and I'm just so down. I don't know where. I mean, Camille is fine in the sense of she's a good heavy, but I just don't see where her direction is right now. I'm just kind of lost on it. I want it to be better, and I don't feel like it's getting better. We're having these random just title matches. Aminata is very talented, but they've done really nothing with her on TV other than the Serena Deeb stuff. She's with Serena Deeb in a feud, but then she's wrestling Mercedes in a title match. It's just kind of like, it was what it was. But what do you think about Mercedes and, where she's going right now?
I like the match with Queen Aminata. I thought that was a good match. I think that's a nice sort of resume builder for Queen Aminata. No one really thought she had a real chance to knock off Mercedes Moné for the TBS championship there, but just being in the ring with someone like that and being seen in the ring by fans is something that I think will help Queen Aminata going forward. I'm not super thrilled with how Mercedes Moné's AEW run has gone. There's just a spark that's missing, I think. As you mentioned, Camille, I think, has been a really good addition to her act and solidifies Moné as a heel. But that whole babyface heel back and forth, I think, really killed a lot of momentum at the beginning of her run in AEW, Chris. And I don't know that she's fully recovered from that yet.
All right, prepare the hot take, Cannon. Everything I said about Jon Moxley, just flip it. As a professional wrestler and as a professional wrestling company, your job is to make me care. Mercedes Moné has had zero credible opponents who we had any reason to believe were going to beat her. The people that she's wrestled that are good, Britt Baker and Willow Nightingale specifically, wrestled her at a time where there was no chance she was losing. So we have somebody who came in as a face, which was unavoidable. She was always going to get the cheers. Held on to that for too long. Turned into a heel with X-Pac heat, who has the worst promos of any major name. Has shown a significant amount of ring rust. She's getting better. The match tonight was good. Aminata has come on leaps and bounds over where she was when she first started in this company. Mm-hmm. But what is she doing to make anybody care? Nobody thinks she's going to lose, so there's no reason to watch. And this shows to a larger point. Mercedes Moné has good matches. I can watch a good match on pretty much any night of the week in at least 4 different companies. I don't need to tune in every week to see that. I can see good wrestling. That's not enough. And it's proven that it's not enough because the company has gone from 1 million viewers to 650,000 viewers. So people aren't coming just to see good wrestling. There is no doubt that AEW has great wrestling. There's no doubt that Mercedes Moné is talented. But we don't care about her. There's nothing to care about. What is she? What is the CEO? Like, she's the CEO of what? Isn't that above an EVP? Shouldn't she be able to control the company then? What is her motivation? What does she do except for make complaints and ask people to say hello to her? What like there's nothing there. It's all flash and no substance.
I got to be honest. I did not know we had a hot take cannon. I don't think Wade left that for me. Let me look.
He shipped it to me. I've got
okay. I was going to say, I hope next time he leaves that to me when I'm hosting, because I would love to have that, and I'd love to show that off here on the show. But I don't think I got that for tonight. So that'll have to wait. But yeah, I mean, I think those are all good points. I think this character is very one-dimensional. It could be more. But it just seems like she's content to do this thing that she's kind of always does. And I don't know. There's just not a lot there to get excited about right now. She does have good matches, especially big matches. I think she's still got the big match credentials that she honed in WWE and NXT. And I thought she had a good match with Queen Aminata. But as you mentioned, for someone that AEW is probably paying a lot of money to, it's probably not enough. Sean, anything else for us tonight?
Yeah, last big thing. Well, it wasn't as big, but I wanted to bring it up because I thought it should be talked about a little bit because I don't know if anybody will get to it. I thought the Shelton Benjamin Leo Rush match was really good. I thought Leo sold his arse off for him. I thought the match was really well laid out, really good. If you're trying to, whatever you're going to get out of Shelton Benjamin, which I don't think is a whole lot, but I think it could be a little here, a little there. I thought it was really good for what they needed to do. Obviously, if he wrestles Swerve, there ain't no damn way he's beating Swerve. And if they do, that's the worst decision they've ever made in the history of their company. But I think that's a good guy for Swerve to beat. You've built Shelton up at least a little bit since he's come in. So I just thought they did a good job of what they're doing with Shelton if they are going to have him go against Swerve. I just thought the match itself was very good. I thought for what they were doing tonight, it worked. So I wanted to hear what you guys thought about it. Even though I don't think Shelton can go anywhere as far as big-time main event. I mean, he's a mid-card guy. That's where he's at. If anybody thinks that, I just don't agree. But for what they did tonight, it was fine. So I want to hear what you guys thought about what they do with Shelton tonight with Leo.
I thought it was a really good match, and I also thought it was very smart to put Leo Rush in there against Shelton Benjamin. And that's a guy, Leo Rush, is going to make Shelton look bigger than he is, and he's going to bump around for Shelton, make him look stronger. So, I thought that was really smart matchup for AEW to go with here. I really like how the MVP group has developed, right? Couple weeks showing up backstage, talking to people, have the big moment on the pay-per-view where after courting Swerve rejects you. The follow-up show, debut Shelton Benjamin in the ring, show the fans that he still can go, show the fans that he still has some potential. I agree. I don't think he's a main event guy. He's not even going to be the main guy in this group once Bobby Lashley debuts, I'm sure. So he'll be kind of taking a step back, but you do want to establish his bona fides, before you do anything else. So I think that was smart. I just really like how they have started to unravel the MVP storyline here and courting Swerve Strickland and eventually probably bringing in Bobby Lashley to take on Swerve. So I've really enjoyed that. Chris, what did you think of Shelton here tonight, knocking off the ring rust a little bit, and the MVP group as a whole and how that storyline has progressed so far?
Shelton Benjamin weighs 263 pounds.
Oh, does he? Okay.
According to his...
Where does he put it?
They announced his weight as 263 pounds, and I'm just like, what? I'm sure he was announced at 220 in WWE. That man is 49 years old, and he does things that I couldn't do at 29. It's unreal. He is a phenomenon. I don't think that match needed to go that long. And when MVP screamed at him from ringside, finish him, put it away, finish him now, I said, yes, we've had enough. And then they went on for another 2 or 3 minutes. I don't think we needed all of that. He showed he was a threat. That knee lift from the floor up to the apron, it's so simple and it's so gorgeous. I did a review of the New Japan event this weekend, and one of the guys on there, Kevin Knight, is incredibly athletic, but he does so many things that he can't pull off, and he ends up missing them. Shelton Benjamin is a perfect example of somebody with tremendous athletic gifts who does things that are simple but look phenomenal. That knee lift is not a complicated move to pull off. It just requires athletic ability, which clearly he has. I love Shelton Benjamin. I've always been a fan of his. Before I understood why he wasn't going to get a push, I wished he had got a push to the main title in WWE. It's too late for that now. He's fine being the decent heater who can win and the odd match here and there. He might beat Swerve with help from Lashley on the debut. Who knows? I wouldn't be against that, honestly, if Lashley shows up and interferes and gets Shelton the win. Swerve can lose and it won't hurt him. I think though.
I think that does. I think what that does is when you eventually get to the Lashley Swerve match, I think it kind of lessens the stakes there because you've already seen,
Yeah.
even though, with help from Lashley, but I think it does kind of lessen the stakes a little bit when you've already seen Swerve lose once to one member of this group. That would be my reservation about that.
Yeah, we're going to a lot more interference in matches again, which I don't like. I don't like that. I think we're starting to do, and like you said, and Chris, I think you're like we're starting to get into that. I don't want to be doing that. The WWE, we got on them and like we should have, and I just think, and right now, like what they're doing, and I don't want AEW to start being that company that starts doing all the interference finishes just to get the heat. And Swerve should not be losing to Shelton. Period. I don't care. Swerve already just lost. He does not need to be losing again. If he's one of the big stars in AEW, he cannot be losing to Shelton Benjamin, who, even though WWE missed the ball on him at a certain time in history, like you said, he's 50 years old now. He doesn't need to be beating Swerve Strickland. It just doesn't need to be happening. So that's all I got. I want to get other people in, get you guys to talk about some emails and other things. Chris, appreciate having you. Always fun getting to talk to you. Greg, appreciate you guys both, man. Thanks for having me on.
Appreciate you, Sean.
Thank you, Sean. Always a pleasure talking wrestling with you and everybody else as well in the chat. Got a lot of people joining us in the chat, so that's a lot of fun. Yeah, I mean, we can just go down the line. We started with the Cole and MJF promos, which we've talked about. We had dueling Chris Jericho, Mark Briscoe promos here, and I was really down. I liked the match at Wrestle Dream, but I was really down on the idea of building this feud almost solely around Chris Jericho bringing up Jay Briscoe for heat. And I mentioned on the round table after Wrestle Dream that we've had so many wrestlers, especially in AEW, inorganically almost bring up the families of their opponents in order to, I don't know, get heat. And it's just too much. And the overreactions for mentioning a kid's name, for example, it does nothing for me. It really takes me out of the moment. So I'm not really thrilled to see it continue in this direction. But what was your take on the promos here? Chris Jericho, for what it's worth, is kind of dropping that veil more and more of that character that he's playing, the learning tree Chris Jericho, the high guys Chris Jericho. He is getting more and more sinister in those promos.
I'd like to see him drop off my television, but well, that's
good luck.
I don't understand what Jericho has said about Jay Briscoe to upset Mark. Both times he mentioned his name, it was done in a respectful way. He's like, your brother was better than you. How is that? Like, what's wrong with that? That's insulting Mark, not Jay. Yeah. So I'm going to be a 2-time champion, just like Jay Briscoe. Where is the insult there? Where is the disrespect there? It's different with children because bringing up a child's name on air kind of brings a minor into the storyline, and the minor isn't really able to consent to that, and it kind of brings personal life into it. And I can kind of get that. But Jay was a professional wrestler and a darn good one. And at no point has he been disrespectfully mentioned. I don't think Mark would have been okay with that. So the motivation for this feud is incredibly thin. The motivation for a rematch is even thinner. And to make it a ladder war, I am terrified that Jericho is going to win that title. Which, by the way, why is it defended more on AEW than Ring of Honor?
Well, Ring of Honor is a whole other story. Tony Khan has mentioned that it almost sounds like he's got plans to reimagine ROH a little bit, so we'll see what that ends up being. But I absolutely agree. I think Chris Jericho is going to win the title here. And sorry, Chris.
Yeah.
That's just kind of how I feel like it's going.
But why? Just why?
Yeah. I don't know. It's more heat, I guess, for Chris Jericho to win the title after mentioning Jay. I don't know. That's kind of my impression of it, and that's my,
I think you're probably
sticking
right.
my finger in the air and figuring out which way the wind is blowing. It seems to be blowing toward Chris Jericho getting the title. That's my impression of it. The first match of this show, FTR versus Big Bill and Brian Keith. And this is again where, something we haven't necessarily talked about, but it goes back to what I mentioned earlier with Bryan Danielson. and just the lack of mentioning of Danielson on that show, the announcers took this tact of being very forlorn and, almost sad because Danielson is gone, but they didn't really mention that was the specific reason. They talked about this new era of AEW being ushered in by Jon Moxley and his group and how that's not a good thing for AEW. And then you had the Outrunners coming out after the match, which FTR won, by the way, doing their posing with FTR. And it's like, it was just very jarring, the different emotions that we're going through here on this show. And I thought it was very inconsistent in the, the feelings that you're supposed to be getting, because the announcers were playing it one way, very sad, very down. And here you have, top talent yucking it up on screen, not seemingly caring that AEW is seemingly circling the drain because of this Moxley group. So it was just another one of those things where the tonally, there was a lot of things that were off and didn't match throughout the show.
Yeah. So I didn't understand the Outrunners thing either. I was all set for Moxley and crew to come out for that, because that's the exact sort of thing he was complaining about at the start of the show. People celebrating and dancing for no reason. The Outrunners came out having done absolutely nothing and posed with FTR, who had just won a match against a thrown together tag team. I did think Bill and Keith looked good together. And I can't call them Bill and Keith because it sounds like they're about to go on an excellent adventure. But I thought that tag team did have some promise, way more promise than Brian Cage and Lance Archer. If you're going to put Lance Archer in a team, bring in Alex Zane. I'm begging you. Alex Zane is incredible, and he's not a musclehead. But the Outrunners thing, just why?
They're very popular.
They are incredibly popular. I've mentioned this on post shows before. There was an excellent quote by he who shall not be named that was brought up on the podcast, Stone Cold's podcast, right before he said he didn't believe in CTE, which anyway. It was about Steve Blackman. Steve Blackman's music hit and the crowd popped. And Austin looked at McMahon and said, "Man, what a pop." And McMahon said, "Yeah, I really hope he gets over." And that really stuck with me, because there's a difference between getting a pop and being over. The Outrunners get a pop, but they're not over yet, because they're not.
They're selling merch.
They are selling merch, but that's microwave stuff, right? They don't have long-term. They don't have lost abilities. They're the flavor of the month. Like, what's his name?
Joe Hendry.
Joe Hendry's a little bit more staying power, but Mizdow.
Oh.
Or Danhausen when he first showed up. Mm-hmm. They're incredibly popular for a while. Even the Acclaimed, although that did last a little bit longer. Flash in the pan, and then they'll fade away because they don't have the staying power to last. FTR, by the way, some of the punches that Dax was throwing tonight, there was enough air in between them. You could have parked the car there, which means Shane McMahon has been confirmed.
Oh no! Oh boy, you're stirring the pot tonight, Chris.
Listen, that's why I'm here. That's why Wade's not here. He doesn't want to have to deal with this.
Maybe so. Speaking of the Acclaimed, they were next in a backstage interview. MVP comes in and says, "If you want to get serious, call me." This was interesting because Billy Gunn had walked off the set to go bring the car around. It does kind of feel like it's time for something new for the Acclaimed. And I don't know if being part of this MVP group is truly what's next for them, but I don't think it would be the worst thing for them. I think it's probably hard to get away from what made you popular in the first place. There's a sense of wanting to hang on to that, like grim death. But really, I mean, the Acclaimed, to me, have done all they can do in this incarnation of their characters. I would like to see them. I mean, I think pairing up with MVP and Shelton Benjamin and eventually Bobby Lashley would be kind of interesting. And I think kind of interesting is not something I can say I've thought a lot about the Acclaimed lately. So that would be a step up for me. So do you think that's a hint of something to come? Or is this just a way for MVP to keep giving his business card to wrestlers on the roster?
I think it could be a bit of both. MVP has to sow a lot of seeds before any of them start to sprout.
Yeah.
And he's just sort of taking a scattershot approach right now. There's no shame in changing a character that stopped working. The Acclaimed were immensely popular for a long time. AEW rightly rode that wave. They gave them a run with the tag titles. They gave them the trios titles. They spotlit them, and now they're being downplayed a bit because that popularity has faded. Time to go away and learn a new hold. That's what Jim Ross likes to say. And putting them with MVP could do that. Similarly, putting them against MVP could give them the kick up the butt that they sorely need and maybe turn them into a bit more serious. I don't mind Max Caster coming out and doing a rap, but maybe try not to walk the edge so much. His one at Wrestle Dream, I ended up cringing at a lot of it. Eric Adams, fine to take a shot at. Sean Combs, maybe leave that one alone.
Mm-hmm. Before we go on, there's a couple comments recently that I starred that I want to get to that I thought were interesting. Ramen Noodle says, I think there is an obvious through line of non-serious characters being confronted about their careers up and down the card. I see the vision. And I was actually thinking about that during our earlier conversation about Moxley's attacks. I mean, look at the people he's attacked. Dark Order, not exactly a serious group. Top Flight, we last saw them dressing like airline employees. It was Orange Cassidy, right? So, that's not outside the realm of possibility. And I mean, it fits in with kind of what Jon Moxley is talking about. That, I don't know if it was you. I think it was you, Chris, who made the mention of Moxley wanting to kind of rebuild AEW in his image.
Yeah.
And there's certainly no room for Orange Cassidy's in Jon Moxley's image of AEW.
And I think just as telling is the fact that they didn't beat down Darby Allin, because you can't level that same accusation at Darby. So I think it's an excellent point. It does kind of lend support to my questioning of why they didn't come out to the Outrunners, though. Maybe because FTR was there. But no, it's that might actually be it, that he's just trying to take out all the...
There are so many of those in AEW. They got to take it one at a time. They can't take them out all at once.
Can we get Smart Mark Sterling next? Can he be on the list?
Please. I hope he's not listening. He'll threaten to sue. But anyway, the other comment that I starred that I want to talk about here before we move on is Glenn B. He says, there is a huge need for AEW to make at least one big star and then book them right for a year. They have had chances but dropped them all. I still go back to Wardlow squashing MJF and missing after. And certainly Wardlow is a really good example. I think there are other examples of guys like, Sammy Guevara and Daniel Garcia, where it really felt like the machine was about to get behind them, and then for whatever reason, and to be fair, some of these reasons are outside AEW's control, that these guys just don't get to that spot where it seemed like AEW wanted them to get, fans wanted them to get, whatever the case may be. I look at a guy like Kyle Fletcher. I mean, I got my eye on him. I wonder, not a baby face, but I wonder if he's a guy that they can really get behind. But I think the overall point Glenn making is they need to make new stars, and they need to make big stars. They can't go half measures with some of these guys, which is why, and I feel like I'm kind of in the minority on this, so tell me what you think, Chris, but Daniel Garcia last week on Dynamite had a very big promo, very intense promo, one of his best promos that he's ever had, and I thought he was in a real upward trajectory, and then at Wrestle Dream, he gets beaten down by MJF. He gets big-footed by Adam Cole in terms of babyface, right? And so, he leaves the ring, lets Adam Cole celebrate by himself. And I thought, man, you had something there with that promo on Wednesday. And then I felt like you kind of threw it away at Wrestle Dream. And I understand it's probably setting up Daniel Garcia versus MJF at some point. But I thought the way that Daniel Garcia came off at Wrestle Dream was not how I would have capitalized on a very good top-level promo that he cut on Wednesday, especially because he's not a made man at this point. Fans don't see him as a main event star yet. So you really have to be careful with how you book guys like Daniel Garcia if eventually you want him to be seen as a main event babyface. So talk a little bit about the points Glenn's making there and how important you think it is that AEW do what Glenn's suggesting there in his comment.
Well, he's 100% correct. Now, a lot of the times they've tried this, it's been people self-sabotaging. MJF got squashed by Wardlow because MJF no-showed that signing or what have you, with the whole uproar about did he have a plane ticket out of there, did he not? Nobody cares. The point is he no-showed an event. Sammy Guevara, well, he's Sammy Guevara. We don't need to talk about how many times he's self-sabotaged. I'd just like to point out that Miro, Aleister Black, and Keith Lee are all still under contract to this company. Where are they? Nobody knows. Remember when Takeshita beat Kenny Omega twice in a row? AEW certainly doesn't seem to remember that. They have tried to build stars, but either Tony Khan got himself a new shiny toy that he needed to push, or there's been an injury, or somebody's been an idiot. And some of those things are out of their control. They can't help the injuries. They can't help people being idiots. I think Danny Garcia redeemed himself tonight. I think that him getting
he definitely felt like a leader tonight.
Yeah, he got in the face of the EVPs. He didn't back down when they said it's not our problem. He didn't sound like a scared little boy like Wheeler Yuta has when he's been given the chance to do these things. You're right that he isn't seen as a main event star yet, but I think they are trying to get him there. That's what his prominent role in the storyline is designed to do. Darby Allin is probably the closest they've got to somebody who they can build and book properly. He has been consistently booked well, except when he's got himself injured. The only slight slip up was the coffin match that went like 7 minutes, but that was due to other matches going long before then. So I think Darby Allin is probably the closest to that, and Daniel Garcia would be my next choice after that.
Back to Dynamite tonight, we had a backstage interaction between Private Party and the Young Bucks. Stokely Hathaway comes in and basically needles Private Party for not living up to expectations, for losing to the Bucks once again, and hints at them breaking up. So is there an appetite for Private Party as singles wrestlers here, or is this kind of like what we saw with MVP in the Acclaim segment, just kind of teasing something that may not ever come to fruition?
I don't know about you, but whenever I want someone to do something for me, I insult them and their friend and try to drive them
away. Of course, it's the best way.
Great tactic. I don't know where this is going, and it's kind of bothering me because I was sure that Private Party were going to Japan for the Junior Tag League. They would be the perfect addition to that tournament. And I had this distinct feeling after they did the linger in the ring on Saturday that maybe they were going to go away for a little while. Maybe they still will, and they'll come back and be with Stokely. Stokely needs something to do. He's too good and too entertaining to have no talent. I don't know why they took Statlander away from him. That was weird, and what she's been doing on social media is even weirder. But if he's going to be in charge of Private Party, that will definitely give them an edge, whether they're face or heel. I'd be all for it. I want them to go to New Japan for a couple of months.
We had the Elite interview backstage celebrating Kenny Omega's birthday, and I use that term loosely. This was one of those ideas that probably sounded better on paper than execution, dumping I don't know, what was it supposed to be? Something disgusting.
It was animal intestines because he
all
has
over
diverticulitis, Greg. It's hilarious.
Of course. All over the cake that they had made for Kenny Omega. You know, big picture, it's just keeping Kenny Omega in fans' minds. But this felt like it was probably better left on the cutting room floor.
But he said the B word. He said bitch, Greg.
I know.
It's funny.
Reset the bitch-o-meter, as Wade Keller would say.
As much as I wish that they would just stop doing it, because there's a place and a time to use that expression. And they have used it properly. The problem is it gets a huge pop every time he says it. So he's going to keep saying it. That's just pro wrestling 101. If someone gets a reaction, keep doing it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's it. It may not have been the intention when it first started, but I'm sure it caught on and someone took notice and said, okay, this is what you're going to do. At the end of every promo, you're going to say the word. And it's like, okay, I mean, it does feel kind of one note for someone the level of Kazuchika Okada, but like you said, it gets a reaction. So that's what they do.
From what I understand, he wanted to play this character. He wanted to be this heel character and play up a goofy side because he's spent his entire career being the ultra serious, amazing long match wrestler, and he wanted to show what he could do. The fact that Derek Mitchell has just made that comparison with Okada saying bitch and Funaki saying indeed has completely changed my opinion, and now I hate it. Oh, why did you have to say that? You're right, and it's bothering me.
Okada had a good run anyway
yeah.
in New Japan. Now he's just it's kind of like the Shinsuke Nakamura contract. You get the big contract, you get to goof off a little bit. I guess you've earned that, right?
He'll be Collision's #1 announcer before the end of the year.
Oh dear. Our third match on the show was the match that went to a no contest when Moxley's group interfered. Rocky Romero, Orange Cassidy, and Kyle O'Reilly against the Young Bucks and Kazuchika Okada. So we had the Elite kind of sitting back in the aisle and almost debating whether or not to help, and then they ended up deciding against it. And then, almost very similar to Roman Reigns and Jimmy Uso when Cody Rhodes was getting beaten down by the New Bloodline. What did you make of that? And of course, the interaction backstage with Daniel Garcia and those guys with the Elite. What role do you see the Elite playing in what we're seeing from this new Jon Moxley group? Because someone had made the comment earlier, and I don't know if I started or not. King of Strong Style said, I'm just confused. Didn't they just do a takeover story with the Elite? So you had the Elite's takeover. They famously pile drove Tony Khan, and that was supposed to be their takeover of AEW. And now we have another group coming in and taking over AEW. And now what is the Elite's role in that, do you think, going forward?
Shout out to Rude Dog. I have a notebook full of notes on this particular thing. I went through the 7 stages of grief with this match because my first thought was, why is this happening? Orange Cassidy was prominently front and center at the end of Wrestle Dream, sitting on the floor looking dejected. And I thought, you're putting him in a random 6-man with people he has no beef with. This doesn't make any sense. He should not be in this match. You could have put anybody else in here. And then I realized, okay, well, Kyle O'Reilly wants the match with Okada, so it makes sense for that to be happening. And I guess you didn't want to put Mark Briscoe here. So the conglomeration, sure, okay. And then the interference happened, and it all made sense. Because the interference brings it back to Orange and Moxley. It puts the EVPs in the position that you just mentioned, where there was the will they, won't they, should they. I think they're going to be this sort of scared little family that just doesn't get involved. Almost like a Switzerland, but not for reasons of wanting to stay neutral, but reasons of being afraid. Mm-hmm. They don't want to get involved because they don't want to get beaten down. I don't think they're going to be able to avoid it, and I think eventually they are going to get hauled back in, and we're going to have an Elite reunion. But for the time being, they're going to have this with everybody sort of pleading with them to intervene. If I remember correctly, I was not a WCW guy back in the day, but weren't the Four Horsemen kind of in that role originally against the NWO? Didn't they kind of stay on the periphery to start with until it started to affect them? Somebody who's more versed in WCW can probably correct me.
Yeah, I know it wasn't. I mean, you would think that a group the level of the Four Horsemen versus the NWO would be like a big selling point, but it never really got to that point. I think part of it was because the Horsemen were mostly heels, and the NWO were heels, at least at first, so there wasn't a lot of crossover for that reason. And I think you're seeing something similar here where the Elite are heels, and certainly Moxley's group are heels. But I agree with you. At some point, they're going to have to be pulled into this in some way. And that's kind of what I'm interested in. What shape does that take? How do they end up getting pulled into it? What's the reaction to it? What is their role once they do get pulled into this Moxley vortex or whatever you want to call it? That's kind of an interesting thought for probably much further down the line.
Yeah, I think that really tied the whole show together for me. It brought in all of the disparate storylines that we had seen up to that point and made it all make sense. I wish they had done a run-in on the Outrunners, but then this one would have been less effective. So
true.
I'll live with it.
Derek chiming in, the Four Horsemen and Dungeon of Doom actually banded together to combat the NWO. So, hey, strange bedfellows.
Yeah,
when it
I know
comes
they
to,
did. I thought they had to be convinced to do it. I don't remember if they did it immediately or not, but my memory is very gray area on that.
We talked about the Lio Rush Shelton Benjamin match already. The Don Callis family press conference, and everybody seems to have their take of Don Callis. There's a lot of people on social media who don't feel like Don Callis is doing anything to get his charges over anymore. I know Wade, I was just reading the Torch newsletter that came into my mailbox the other day, and he was commenting in one of his Dynamite TV reports that Callis's group needs more TV time. So where do you fall on the spectrum of enjoying or not enjoying Don Callis and his group, and what did you think of this? We got the Kyle Fletcher. You guys don't deserve an explanation, which always sucks. But I'm high on Kyle Fletcher as a single star, so I'm excited to see where that goes. Obviously, he's got Lance Archer now in that trade with Jake Roberts. It's kind of setting everybody out there in a bit of a retooling of the Don Callis family set in motion tonight.
I've been a Don Callis fan since I heard him doing commentary on ECW. My very first ECW event.
Cyrus the Virus.
I don't know which one it was now, but I do remember watching the show, and it had New Jack coming out to Murder Was the Case with a shopping cart full of weapons, but I haven't narrowed it down at all. He gets a ridiculous amount of heat, which is exactly what you want for a heel manager. He is doing a great job on that front. He has a very large stable. Lest we forget, Powerhouse Hobbs is in that stable somewhere. And they don't do anything. Up until recently, they had no titles. They rarely wrestled. Maybe they're actually now going to do something with this group. I do not like Brian Cage. I should like Brian Cage because he does a lot of things that I enjoy, but I don't like his personality, and I don't like the fact that he revels in the idea of get my stuff in. Mm-hmm. I don't know what's happened to Gates of Agony, who were part of a group with Brian Cage and would have been a better choice to go after the tag team titles as opposed to two large men who've never teamed together before. And if, again, Alex Zane is right there. He is not signed to a major company, and it's a crime. That guy is amazing. So if you've got Don Callis, you have to let him speak. And he's been kind of making himself the focal point. I think tonight he kind of shifted that a little bit. It wasn't so much about him. I don't know what was on Kyle Fletcher's face, but I thought for sure he was going to give us a word-for-word retelling of was it the Seth Rollins promo who said, all I hear is why, Kyle, why? You sold out. I didn't sell out. I bought in. That was, I know Jeff Hardy said it, but I figured that's where he was going with that. Takeshita actually speaks better English than that, so I don't know why they didn't let him say it. But I think we're going to start to see he's pushing a bit more of that towards his charges, and we're going to start to see him actually get somewhere.
In the chat here, Sean says Fletcher and Takeshita is all they need for that family. The family hasn't meant much, but Archer and Cage have lost so much. I think there's a point to be made there that when you have guys like Fletcher and Takeshita who are legitimate major title contenders, does it bring down how people view them when you also have Brian Cage and Lance Archer in that group, who are pretty far below Fletcher and Takeshita in the pecking order?
I think it has to, really. And this is what happened with the NWO when they started to bring in people like VK Wall Street and Vincent and all these jobbers who just they showed up because they were friends with Hogan. Mm-hmm. That's what you're going to get, is that these people at the bottom of your stable drag you down. The Nation of Domination is one of the stables I always cite as every single person came out of that better off than when they went in. The Shield, I mean, that was only 3 people. The Nation was a lot more. But if you work with a stable of similarly talented guys, nobody gets dragged down. Kyle O'Reilly had to get away from Ospreay because they are way too similar. So I like the turn. But if he's going to be in that stable, he has to push out on his own now. And I'm glad they didn't put him in that tag team because, if you team him with Lance Archer, he gets pulled down to Lance Archer's level.
Mm-hmm. Sean says you can only have so many factions. Sean, have you watched AEW? Tony Khan takes that as a challenge. You saying that. So just so you know.
Go watch New Japan and come back with that comment.
Indeed. All right. Mariah May backstage for an interview looking for a new challenger seemed to be answered by Anna Jay. I know Anna Jay had spent some time in Japan honing her craft, which I thought was a fantastic, at least smart move for her. She's come back and wrestled a few matches. But what do you make of Anna Jay stepping up and being the next challenger for Mariah May?
It's all space filler. She's not a threat. It's a reward for her going to Stardom and competing in that tournament. And I haven't really seen enough of her since to know if it's done any good. Mm-hmm. She was fine when she left. I don't know how you could go and wrestle on one of those tournaments and not improve. But it'll be a decent match. And it's all really just biding time until Shirakawa is available or Tony Storm comes back.
Yeah, Sean saying Mariah needs Mina to come back soon, or Tony Storm. But in the meantime, I think Anna Jay's fresh, anyways. Like you said, nobody's gonna believe anybody who faces Mariah May is going to have a chance before she faces Tony Storm. Everybody is going to be seen just as a placeholder until Tony comes back to extract her revenge. And so I guess you could do worse than Anna Jay as a placeholder right now. I think, like you said, she's kind of earned this opportunity, and it's an opportunity for her to kind of take a step up the ladder. She's fresh. It's not like we're having Hikaru Shida for the 3rd time in this role or somebody like that, which I love Shida, but I'd rather have someone new like Anna Jay get an opportunity than Shida go through and get it again. So, but ultimately, until Tony Storm steps back in the ring against Mariah May, we're just kind of biding our time, it feels like.
Does anybody remember Athena? Remember her? Wouldn't it be nice to have her against Mariah May right now?
I mean, there is that belief that she's being kind of wasted in ROH. I know she had made a few appearances in AEW when she first got signed, but she's been almost exclusive to ROH for a long time. So I think she's the one person that wrestles in ROH that people are like, of all the people to be ROH exclusive, you're making Athena ROH exclusive. Like, she could be used on the AEW women's division, and they need her. So I don't know. That's an interesting choice. Maybe someone will ask Tony Khan about that in a conference call. Who knows? We had the Ricochet interview, and he sets out a challenge for Collision, an open challenge, seemingly for Collision. Any ideas who you would like to see answer that, or any guesses as to who might be the one to answer that at Collision?
Leo Rush.
Okay. Because is that a guess or who you would like to see?
It's both. Okay. It's also the sort of thing that Tony Khan would book because he has matches that he wants to see, and it's the sort of thing that those two can get in there and have fun with each other. One thing I did take issue with in that promo was Ricochet saying he hasn't been pinned in AEW. Pretty sure that was a double pin when he and Ospreay faced off, which means you were pinned. They didn't wipe that from the record books. Like, that happened. You were pinned. I don't know. Ricochet going after that title and not Ospreay going back after it is fine, because Ospreay needs to be pushed up the card. And actually, he's another possibility for sort of leading the charge against Moxley, because he is kind of directionless right now. Once he's finished with the family, which should be soon, he's got to have a match with Kyle, then he has a clear runway to go after Moxley.
We had the more BCC destruction. I call them Blackpool Combat Club for shorthand. I know it's not. Well, it's 3 out of 4 anyway of them. And then Pac as well. Backstage with the Dark Order, Top Flight, they kind of cut a promo. They want a match with this group. So God bless them, I guess, for setting up that challenge. But is that kind of beneath the Moxley group at this point, or is it just worth it having them get a chance to dominate some teams again and just kind of flex their proverbial muscles?
They haven't really wrestled as a unit. So we're going to get to see them wrestle together. They're going to beat the ever-loving tar out of the Dark Order. They'll win the match, and then they'll continue beating the living daylights out of them. And then we'll have people come out to save them. Like, it's pretty by the numbers booking, but that's fine. Like, this stuff has worked for decades, and it will always work because it makes sense and it's logical. And I don't think it's below them if it's competitive, but I don't think it will be.
Okay. And then the main event, Jay White versus Christian Cage. We had Hangman seemingly, I don't know if he blew his cue and came out too early or what the deal with that was.
And then they showed him lying there looking sheepish.
Well, I mean, at first, like, he came out and the camera, like, kind of missed it. Like, they were focused on something else. And I'm like, why would they not show Hangman Page coming out? Like, that's kind of a big deal. And then as it progresses, you're like, oh, maybe he wasn't supposed to come out then. And because he had to hide around ringside for quite a while. But Christian Cage defeats Jay White. Hangman Page costs Jay White the victory. Seems like we're setting up Jay White versus Hangman Page. I know there was a lot of people very excited coming out of Wrestle Dream that Jay White would, we're listing earlier who should AEW take that 1 year and really push and really make a main event star during that time. And, Jay White is a guy I think people would pound the table for in terms of AEW getting behind him in a way that they haven't yet. I think people have been disappointed by his push since he signed with AEW. This feud with Hangman Page is going to be a big deal. Page coming off a big victory over Swerve Strickland. And so I don't know. I think this could be a very important feud for Jay White. I'm glad to see him get the spotlight in this way. What did you think of the match and Hangman's interference and, the future of Jay White versus Hangman Page as a feud?
I hated it all, honestly. I love Jay White. I think he's incredibly talented. He's good on the mic. He is a great wrestler. I loved Excalibur on Saturday talking about how Jay White is a counter wrestler and he needs people to come at him. And I'm just like, yes, this is what we need. We need more of this. Tell us something about this guy and why we should care. But why is he losing to Christian Cage? Christian doesn't need that win. He beat Hangman clean. There's no reason for him to go back to Hangman. He's supposed to have this second person he wants revenge on. The commentators made it sound like that was Christian Cage for some unknown reason. It's more than likely MJF, but he's not going to talk about that until MJF is done with Cole. But the match made no sense for it to even happen. Hangman is just another interference finish, like Sean was talking about. I don't need to see those two fight again because there's no reason for it to happen. Hangman needs to find a way to move on and give himself something to do to reestablish himself. We have to remember that fight was a lights out match, so it doesn't count technically. So he can't really use that as justification to push himself.
He can't move up the AEW top 10 rankings because of that.
That's right. That's right. It's very important. It does not count. And it's also not a loss for Swerve, technically. This is also silly. Jay White should not have been losing that match, and I don't understand why he would. But you said people have been upset with his push. He's one of them. He's been reportedly incredibly frustrated with the way he's being used. He didn't want to go there in the first place. He went there because WWE put a hiring freeze on, and he got a large amount of money waved in his face, and he said, well, it's better than staying where I am. Mm-hmm. He's got this awkward situation where he can't wrestle for New Japan because of the stipulation of when he left the company, thinking he was going to WWE. So they have to kind of push him, but not around the time of Forbidden Door, which is kind of weird. But I just, it's another case of stop-start booking. You've lost to Christian Cage. What has he done? What has Christian done? He's missing his heater right now. He's carrying around that contract, which he's not cashing in on Moxley. There's this whole thing just, I don't know. I did not like any of it.
So Sean has some thoughts on the main event as well. He says, so many thoughts about the main event. Jay, I thought needed a big win over a guy like Christian. I didn't like the interference during the match, but it made sense to keep the feud going. So I guess there's two ways to look at this. Jay White beats Christian Cage clean. Hangman Page comes out after the match, brawls with Jay White. Maybe Hangman gets the upper hand. Maybe Jay White gets the upper hand. But whatever, it continues the feud. Or Christian Cage wins by Hangman interference, costing Jay White the match. I would always err on the side of a clean finish, do what you want post-match. And to me, I don't know that there's a difference between, I don't know why you would need to have Hangman interfere to cost Jay White the match versus have Jay White win and then have Hangman attack him after the match. I'm not sure if this accomplishes the finish that we saw accomplishes any more than the alternate finish would have done. And it would have made Jay White look better by having him beat Christian, someone the caliber of Christian, who is still a big deal in AEW. And
also, he cost him the match and then just left it at that. And we saw Jay White sort of laughing to himself afterwards. But if you're that mad at the guy that you still want to fight him, you're going to cost him a match and then not try and beat him up afterwards.
Yeah.
So your anger kind of just calms down once a 3 count hits. What is it, Festus? Like that didn't make sense, especially with the way Hangman has been with his new character. He should have gone in the ring and beaten the tar out of him, but he just left.
Yeah. It felt very flat to finish the show that way.
Yeah. And I don't think he's going to continue feuding with Christian. Christian has bigger fish to fry now.
Yeah,
he's going to go back to the Hangman feud. But how do you get out of that at this point?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this was a show of ups and downs, I think, and there were some good things on this show for sure. But there were some just stuff that made you scratch your head. I think more and more that's becoming commonplace for Dynamite week to week, I think. But I think we kind of succinctly, maybe not succinctly, but we summed it up. Took us a little while. But Chris, anything else about Dynamite tonight that we missed or that you want to touch on or anything else that you want to talk about from tonight?
Check the handy dandy notebook. I did notice that Mercedes Moné isn't using her ugly finisher anymore. And I'm hoping that means that she's just not going to use it. It's convoluted and she never made it look good. So maybe it's going away. Please make it go away. Overall,
that would be a good sign.
We both had stuff to complain about on this show. We had some gripes. I don't think if I came on to a post show and just praised everything to the hilt, I would be asked back. So I don't want to give the impression that I don't like these shows. I thought this was a really good Dynamite. There was stuff on there that annoyed me, but this Moxley angle and the way it's sort of creeping into other parts of the show and it is doing things that even the Bloodline angle didn't do, because it's drawing in an entire company as opposed to just parts of it. And I think if they are careful with this, not only does it have the potential to be the best booked and the only well-booked invasion angle in pro wrestling, but it has the potential to be a company arching angle that can work at multiple levels of the card. And I'm really excited to see how this goes. And I'm hoping that the people who are writing this story are being given the freedom to continue it, and it's not going to get vetoed at any point.
Unless you are like 100% ride or die with AEW or WWE, I think it's hard for these companies to put out a 2-hour show where you don't have anything to criticize. That it's very hard to do creatively. Like that's very difficult. So we come on here and we say, yeah, that was good. It could have been better. Or yeah, I didn't care for that so much. I mean, that's not, we're not ripping the thing to pieces or anything like that. But I think to your point though, about Moxley's group, AEW obviously needs something to shake up the foundation of the company and shake up interest in the company. Because, you kind of alluded to this earlier, the ratings are not probably where they want them, even though they just got a big TV deal. I'm sure they would not love to have the line on the graph going down when it comes to the ratings year over year and week after week. I think this Moxley group is an attempt to try something new and to try something big and bold and to see if that's going to get people to tune in. And God bless them for it. I think that's a smart thing to do. If you're wanting to stem the tide a little bit, you got to go big. And, Jon Moxley is a known commodity from his time in WWE, from his time for years atop AEW. So, people who may have watched AEW but tuned out and they hear, Jon Moxley's doing this really interesting thing now. Moxley's got enough goodwill built up with even probably the fans who at one time tuned into AEW, but who've gone away from the product, where they may decide, hey, I still like Moxley. Like, let me give this a chance. Yeah. Let me see. So I can't fault AEW for doing it because I think it's smart. I think you try something big, try something bold, see if that's going to be something that can bring in more viewers.
I think even if the attempt doesn't work out, I want to give them credit for trying. And I want to come back to this in 2 or 3 months and say, okay, the angle turned out to be garbage, but they tried it. Go bigger picture on this, I've just randomly been talking to people recently who told me that they used to be big wrestling fans and they want to get back into wrestling, and they've seen clips on YouTube. And I said, okay, well, I don't watch WWE now. I watch New Japan and I watch AEW. Oh yeah, AEW. I've seen some clips from that, but it just seems too much for me. And then they will invariably say some names that they like, and it's always the same names. MJF is great. I like that Jon Moxley guy. Orange Cassidy is entertaining. Those are always the names you get. And it just goes to show. And this is the crux of every argument that we have about AEW on these post shows. Professional wrestling, as good matches, will never sell a show to the extent that it needs to maintain a national audience. There is a core audience of people, of which I am one, who will watch it. But it's not enough on its own. And the lapsed fan that Wade was talking about 4 or 5 years ago that AEW needed to attract aren't going to come in for good wrestling because they don't need to. They want to come in for characters who are doing good wrestling. You don't need to sacrifice one for the other. We're starting to see that now. We have some storylines now. We have some meat on the bone. You can't just throw 2 people in a ring and have them wrestle and expect the casual fan to come and watch that. Mm-hmm. The people in this chat room, God bless them, I love them to bits, but they're not casual fans. They are the hardcore fans because they're sitting here at, almost 12 o'clock on a Thursday night, Friday morning, or Thursday morning, talking about professional wrestling. Mm-hmm. They're not the target market anymore because they're going to watch regardless. The target market are the ones who need a little bit more Hollywood in their wrestling. And to some people, that's anathema, and I get that. But you can have both. You don't have to take one and leave the other. Mm-hmm. So I think WWE does it too much. I can't get into the WWE product. It's way too hokey. It's way too produced. It's way too slick. The commentators drive me nuts. They go to Saudi Arabia. I could list off 150 reasons why I can't get into the product. AEW is... I left the show Saturday night when I was watching it with a friend. I was on the verge of not watching it anymore because of the second plastic bag angle, but I think that was a visceral reaction. New Japan's really starting to turn around. There's a guy who does the recaps for the New Japan shows for the Torch, who's a fantastic writer, incredibly talented. You should definitely check out his review of King of Pro Wrestling. It's on the site now. It's I don't remember the guy's name. It's me. And Kelly and I actually recorded a podcast about the show earlier today. But if you're looking for good wrestling and you haven't checked out New Japan, it's there too. But that's kind of the point. YouTube exists. You can see good wrestling anytime you want for free. So AEW needs to do something different. And I think we're starting to see that now. So I could and probably will talk about this for hours if anybody gives me license. And I don't think that's a good idea tonight. But I'm glad to see, like you said, a bold move in a different direction that has the potential to really pay off.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great place to leave it for tonight. Chris, thank you so much for joining me here on the post show. Before we let you go, I know we've talked a little bit about what you do for the Torch, but go ahead and plug your work for the Torch and where fans can follow you.
Yeah, so you can find me on social media, all of them, Lansdelicious, LANSDELLICIOUS. There's a podcast coming up soon, the 7-Star Podcast with me and Kelly Wells talking New Japan. It's not a regular show because New Japan's schedule isn't regular. We'll probably try and get one done right after Royal Quest. We may do one during tag team season. They're about to go into their 2 yearly tag team tournaments. If you like tag team wrestling, this is a good time to watch it. But after that, we're into Wrestle Kingdom mode, and that's when things get really good. Wrestle Kingdom is their WrestleMania. It's a big show every year, and this year is promising to be the start of something massive. They are lining things up for their new generation to come in and take the reins. That's something that people like me and Todd Martin and Sean Radican have been calling out for quite a while. So if it does happen, it's going to be a monumental show. We'll have you covered for that. I do written recaps of the shows. Sean does as well. Sometimes you'll get Javier in there even. And Kelly and I will be doing podcasts on it. Love talking wrestling. I will be on any one of these shows anytime anybody asks me, even though it is currently 1:30 in the morning and I have to get up for work in 4 hours.
Oh, dear. Well, we're going to let you go then, Chris. Thank you so much for joining me. It was great to talk to you again.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, it's good to be with you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris. And don't forget, you can follow me on social media at Greg M. Parks. You can find my weekly column in the Pro Wrestling Torch newsletter and my VIP audio show, Greg Parks Out Loud, each and every week, where I read my column out loud and expand upon some of the topics. And now that I'm not hosting Wrestling Night in America anymore, you can find me on various podcasts. I was on, as I mentioned, the post Wrestle Dream show with Wade and Todd. It was a lot of fun joining them. I don't get the opportunity to podcast with Todd very often, so it was a pleasure joining them. And a couple weeks ago, I was on the post SmackDown Wade Keller Pro Wrestling post show. So find me. I'll pop up here and there, and who knows where I'll be next time, but I'll be sure to advertise my appearance on social media again at Greg M. Park. So thank you again for joining me. Wade will be back on Friday for the SmackDown post show. Really enjoyed hosting this tonight, and have a good evening.